Hello and welcome. Welcome to the first day of Roots Tech, where your minds are still so expansive and they're not all stuffed full of information yet, and you feel like you're just ready to take on the world. Thank you for joining me today in this first session of four about how to do the DNA. My name is Diane Southard. I am founder and CEO of Your DNA Guide, and our goal is to help you do the DNA, whatever that looks like for you. So I want to start off by having this fabulous slide that Roots Tech has prepared for us that, just be polite, audience, but I'm happy for you to take as many pictures as you want of my slides. I work really hard on them, so if you want to take pictures, totally fine with me. So I want to start by telling you Kristen's story. Kristen is a graduate of our DNA Skills Workshop and actually a friend of mine when I used to live in South Florida. So Kristen has this ancestor, Daniel Booker. He was born 1819 in Virginia. Then sometime in the 1830s, he was moved to Alabama. And notice I said he was moved. Daniel was a slave. So she has done some great genealogy. She knows the line all the way back to Daniel, but of course, she doesn't know anything more about him. She turned to her DNA. And in the DNA Skills Workshop, she learned how to group her matches and to sort them, and she started noticing that the group of matches that corresponded to this Booker line actually had lots of Booker DNA matches. But all of them went back to this man in Texas. So, of course, the question is, how are the Bookers from Texas related to her Daniel Booker, who, again, Virginia to Alabama? So she starts looking into this common ancestor that these individuals have. Their common ancestor's name was David Booker, born 1824. But he was also born in Virginia. So by doing genealogy and with the help of other DNA matches, she was able to determine that David Booker and her ancestor, Daniel Booker, were brothers. And in the 1830s, when her ancestor was moved to Alabama, their ancestor was moved as well. And you think about these two young boys, perhaps all each other had, and being separated, and their families having no idea about the presence of the other one. So this is David Booker. This is a picture that she got from one of her DNA matches. So this is her, 3 times great uncle or something. And this is her, Kristen's great-grandfather, Joe Booker, her ancestor Daniel's grandson. So not only has she discovered this connection, but she has a photograph now of this connection, and that has meant the world to her. In fact, Kristen said, "I still get emotional every time I tell anyone about this. And I've made other discoveries since then, connecting other ancestors who were enslaved. I truly feel like this is a way, in part, to restore some of the humanity and dignity that their life circumstances tried to take from them." This is the potential of DNA. It restores what was lost and what perhaps couldn't be found in any other way. So it's worth it to learn how to use DNA in your family history. Even though it feels like a foreign language, even though it feels like an uphill battle sometimes, it's worth it because DNA is a record that can help us in ways other records can't. So for the next 45 minutes, we are going to go over 3 DNA test types, 2 different kinds of results, 4 scenarios, and 3 next steps. Are you with me? All right, let's do it. So 3 test types. There are 3 different kinds of DNA tests you can take for family history. So mitochondrial DNA traces just a direct maternal line. So all of us have the same mitochondrial DNA as our mother, the same as her mother and her mother and her mother on back, which, if you stop and think about it, is pretty magical. You are a walking, living, breathing record of your direct maternal line, all of us. Then we have the Y DNA. Of course, Y DNA traces only direct paternal lines. So ladies, we do not have Y DNA, which means we need to turn to our brothers or uncles or fathers to take that Y DNA test for us in order to trace that direct paternal line. So a man has the same or very similar Y DNA as his father, grandfather, great-grandfather on back into time. Okay, so for Y DNA and mitochondrial DNA, the best case scenario, the best thing that can happen if you take one of those tests is you find the one. Yeah, the one DNA match that knows something more than you do about that direct line. Then because you're a DNA match, you know your lines connect and you can begin to do genealogy to figure out your connection. But it looks different for mitochondrial DNA than it does for Y DNA. Because even if you match someone exactly on the mitochondrial DNA, it doesn't mean you're closely related. So for mitochondrial DNA, the time to connecting with another DNA match could be 1 to 20 generations. So I don't know about you. Maybe some of you have done a lot more genealogy than me, but I don't have 20 generations of genealogy. So sometimes, even though you're an exact mitochondrial DNA match to someone else, you won't find that common ancestor. Now, Y DNA is different. The time to connection for Y DNA is generally 1 to 8 generations. So that's put in a very comfortable timeline for most of us, a timeline that most of us are looking for connections. So Y DNA can often be very powerful in your family history research. So mitochondrial DNA for direct maternal lines, Y DNA for direct paternal lines. Then, of course, we have autosomal DNA. Now, autosomal DNA is for both sides of your family, and currently the technology is such that I feel confident in telling you that you can use autosomal DNA to trace your family back to a 3 times great-grandparent. So if you are looking for a 3 times great-grandparent or closer, autosomal DNA will be able to help you. But there's a catch. So let's say this picture represents a fabulous day you spent at the amusement park. It represents all the food you ate, all the rides you went on, all the amazing experiences that you had, the family you were with, everything. If autosomal DNA were asked to tell the story of this day, it would tell it like this. Oh, that's not good, right? Yeah. Autosomal DNA is not a complete record of your family history. In fact, you only got half of your DNA from your mom and half from your dad, which means there's half you did not get. Half! That's a lot, right? So we have to use autosomal DNA strategically. So if we think about it this way, from your 1 and 2 times great-grandparents, all of us have some of DNA from them. Which, again, don't lose the absolute wonder of this. These people are long dead, and you are carrying around parts of them right now. 100%. All of them, even if you don't know their names. You have their record right now inside you. Even as far back as your 3 times greats, you will have some DNA from all of your 3 times great-grandparents most of the time. Sorry, I just went back. Isn't that amazing? Can we just stop and just be amazed by that for just a second? Yeah, DNA is actually pretty amazing in that way. Even if we went back to your 7 times great-grandparents, you would have DNA from 63% of them. So again, not 100. You have real ancestors on that 7 times great-grandparent line that you don't have any DNA from. Again, not a great record. So really, really fun, awesome record, and it's lacking in some ways as well. But we're not really talking, when we talk DNA testing, about what you received from your ancestors. What we're talking about is what all of the DNA descendants of those ancestors received and how much DNA you share with them, right? So if we're looking at, say, your second cousins, Second cousins share great grandparents with you. If you're looking at second cousins, you will share DNA with your second cousins 100% of the time. So if you have a second cousin who's taken a DNA test that you don't share DNA with, that tells you there's a disagreement between your genetics and your genealogy. But we go back just to third cousins even, and you will not share DNA with 100% of your third cousins. So if you had, only 90% of your third cousins you'll share DNA with. We go back to your fourth cousins, and the percentage just keeps dropping. You'll only share DNA with about half of your fourth cousins, which means if 10 true blue, honest to goodness, absolutely verified, documented descendants of your 3 times great-grandparents took a DNA test, you would share DNA with 5 of them. Does it mean you're not related to the other 5? No, you are. You just both didn't receive the same bits of DNA from that couple, and you will not show up as a DNA match. Okay, so this is really important to keep in mind. As much as we tout the power of DNA, it's really important to understand its limitations as well. Okay, so if we go back to 6 cousins, that percentage drops even more. Okay, so this is the point of all of those slides, was DNA cannot tell your whole story. But, as we learned with Kristen, it can add essential chapters. We just need to understand where those chapters fit and what kinds of power they have. Okay? So, that was 3 test types. From each of those 3 test types, you get 2 kinds of results. You're going to get results that link you to other people in the form of a DNA match list, and you're going to get results that link you to other places, sometimes in the form of maps and percentages. We are not going to talk about these in detail at all right now, because that's what lectures 2, 3, 4 are about for the rest of the week. So if you want to learn more about those places, that's the ethnicity lecture, and I'll put up all the times and stuff at the end. But just know that these are fun things to learn about too, which is why we've spread out everything over 4 lectures instead of just 1. So those are the 2 results we'll talk about later this week. 4 scenarios. So there are 4 main reasons, I think, why you might want to use DNA in your family history research. They are to verify, add, gather, and include. So let's talk about verify. We are going to use Ed's story. Now, all the stories that I'm going to tell you today come from the Your DNA Guide blog. So we have a really fantastic blog that's really searchable. So if there's any topic that you're interested in, you can just go to yourdnaguide.com/blog, I think. Maybe. At least it's at the top in the menu. You can click blog, and you can search our blog for all sorts of things that you want to learn about. So this is Ed's story. So Ed grew up in Massachusetts, and he was part of a very extensive New England family. Fishing boats you can see there in the background from his great-grandfather or his grandfather during the 1900s. So this is Ed's heritage. In fact, if we look at his family tree, it's like Massachusetts, England, like forever on every line except one. And his one line, his one great-grandfather, was from Portugal. So this guy, Joseph Bernard, born 1851 in the Azores in Portugal, he immigrated to the United States in 1867. Ed tells me he was a Baptist, a barber, a hard worker, and lame in his left leg. Isn't that cool to know that much about your ancestor? I think it's fantastic. Family rumor says his surname was actually Fonseca. So later in Joseph's life, he actually was committed to the Danvers State Hospital for alcoholism and paranoia. And a note in his commitment papers mentions that Joseph believed he was descended from royalty. Okay, so Ed hired a researcher to see if we could learn more about Joseph's family in Portugal. And the researcher came up with this document listing baby Jose, born 1850, to Antonio Jose de Fonseca and Rosa Maria. And they were 90% certain this is his ancestor. Can he be more than 90% certain? Sure. So what's DNA's role here? Can DNA verify his connection to this couple? And can it verify his connection to royalty? Let's see. So remember, we've got places and we've got people. Those are the two kinds of DNA results that can help contribute to our story. So if we look at the places information, these are Ed's ethnicity results from family tree DNA. And remember, we're going to be talking extensively about ethnicity tomorrow morning, right here, same time, same place, if you want to learn more about ethnicity. But you can see Ed's results say Iberian Peninsula, which is essentially Spain and Portugal. So it says 16%. So does that 16% correlate to the amount he would have received from that particular ancestor? Yeah, so I do this exercise for you in the workbook as well, where I teach you how to get all the percentages out and kind of take all of your ethnicity percentages and lay them out on your family tree to see if there's anything you're missing. So if we do that for Ed, again, he's got a pretty easy family tree to follow. If it's not from Massachusetts and England, it's something else, right? But for each of your great-grandparents, again, these are total averages, and this never works in real life, FYI, but it's about 12% you would expect to get from each ancestor. What percentage was Ed from the Iberian Peninsula? 16. Can we just take a second and be like, that's amazing, isn't it? Nobody told his DNA that his family was from Portugal, right? There's no interaction with his family tree, nothing. This is his DNA reporting to him, yeah, there is a great-grandparent in your family tree from this place. Pretty fantastic. So what about people? So Ed found this particular DNA match who's sharing a certain amount of DNA. And again, we're not going to go into details. We'll do that tomorrow. But in general, what you want to do is check genetics versus genealogy, which means you take that total amount of shared DNA and you ask, is this the right amount of shared DNA for the relationship I think I should have to this person? And if that checks out, then yeah. So by finding a DNA match who was a descendant of this very couple that this researcher had found on a document, Ed is able to verify his connection to this couple, Antonio José de Fonseca and Rosa Maria, thus validating this family rumor that Joseph's surname was actually Fonseca. So that's a check. What about this whole descent from royalty thing? Well, I asked Ed, and he's like, yeah, no. That was made up, right? Now, could DNA help verify descent from royalty? Well, it could if royalty has been DNA tested, right? And that's the thing. Your research success is entirely dependent on who else has tested. So, verifying your family history is something you might want to do with this information. What about adding? So we're going to talk about Sonia's story now. Sonia is looking for her biological grandfather. And again, we turn to the place information. We've got England and Northwestern Europe. And again, for Sonia, she knows that her father's family is all from somewhere else, that this percentage from England is the signal that she's getting from this missing ancestor. So she applied the same kind of technique that we did with Ed. As far as people, she finds this match called Alan. She determines that Alan is a descendant of this man named John Hitch. She does genealogy and discovers that John Hitch's grandson, Henry John, he moved to South Africa, which is where her dad was born. So by finding a DNA match, doing genealogy, she finds a match or finds a person who looks like could be an ancestor of the man she might be looking for. So she starts with Y-DNA testing. Remember, Y-DNA traces a direct male line. So she asks Alan to do a Y-DNA test. She target tests him, we call it. That means that's because Alan has the same Y-DNA as his father, Raymond, and essentially the same Y-DNA as all of these men. So she asks Alan to take a Y-DNA test, and she has her dad take a Y-DNA test. If this is their family tree, their Y-DNA should match. It does. So Y-DNA can tell her that her dad is a part of this family, but Y-DNA is not great at telling you at what generation you're a part of this family. So she needed to do genealogy to see how many sons did this man Henry John have. Because however many sons he had, theoretically, they are the candidates for her father's father. So by doing genealogy, she sees that this man had one son named Basil. She actually found Basil's son, Errol, in MyHeritage. He had not taken a DNA test. He was just a member of MyHeritage and had a tree there. So she reached out to him and asked him to take a DNA test to help her verify this connection, which he agreed to do. And it turns out Errol was, in fact, her dad's half-brother. So, this is what Sonia says. My dad met Errol just before his 83rd birthday during the COVID-19 lockdown in South Africa. The two men got on immediately, and Errol, who was 91 at the time, said that the family resemblance was clear. And last year, I went to South Africa to meet my long-lost half-uncle and new cousins. Isn't that fantastic? So, yay, thank you, clap. Isn't that fantastic? So Sonia, using DNA, both Y and autosomal DNA, was able to add this person to her family tree. What about gathering? Gathering people into your family is also an important role that DNA can play. So this is a story from Sunny Morton. She's actually the content manager at Your DNA Guide. She received this correspondence from one of her DNA matches, inviting her to a family reunion, which, of course, she was pleased as punch about. So gathering people to physically gather them together, as was the goal of this particular DNA match. You can also share photos. Remember Kristen's DNA match sent her that photo of her 3 times great uncle or whatever. Also sharing stories of your family lines, making a complete record. Finding all the descendants of your ancestors is actually a really great strategy in genealogy for lots of reasons. So gathering can mean all or any of these things to you. So how would you find people that are descendants of a particular ancestor if you wanted to gather them in some way for some reason? Perhaps you want to commemorate an anniversary of an ancestor, or you want to celebrate some achievement that they made, and you want to gather your family together to do that. How would you find them all? Well, there are some strategies within your DNA match list. First of all, here at Ancestry, if you click on any DNA match, and Ancestry can see how you're connected because your tree is in their system, and the tree of your DNA match is in your system. You can see that ancestor highlighted there on the side. You can also use the Through Lines tool at Ancestry. So you can click on any ancestor, and that will take you to their sometimes extensive family tree, and will show you different descendants of your ancestor. Now, I call Through Lines a cheating tool. Okay, now we're always told in school not to cheat, and there's good reasons for that, right? But really, the advice is if you're going to cheat, cheat off someone smarter than you, right? I mean, let's be real. Okay, so is Through Lines smarter than you? Probably not. Okay, so Through Lines is just a computer system, right? It's looking at the information you give it, and it's looking at the information that was given to them by your match, and it's saying, oh, looks like you guys share this ancestor, and they throw it up on this tool. Okay, so you have to be really careful. Most of the time, you can trust it, but it is something that you need to verify. So you could click on any ancestor, and then you can see all of their descendants, and you could start reaching out to them, just like Sunny's match did to her. There's a similar tool at MyHeritage, also a cheating tool. It's called the Theory of Family Relativity. To access it, you open up your match page, click on Filters, then go over to this Has Theory of Family Relativity, and that will show you all the individuals in your match list that have this tool. So this tool allows you to see how you're connected to different DNA matches through different common ancestors. So it's a great gathering tool. It's a great way for you to find these matches that are descendants of particular ancestors you might be interested in. Here at RootsTech, have you guys checked out relatives at RootsTech? Did you click on that and sign up and everything? They have a way for you to gather right here at Roots Tech in lots of different ways. So this is by ancestor. So again, if you wanted to see if there were people who were descendants of a particular ancestor of yours here at Roots Tech, you join relatives at Roots Tech, you click on that by ancestor, and you choose the ancestor down at the bottom. You can see I chose my ancestor Eli Seahorn. You can also use this tool by family member, family line. So there's a couple different ways you can do it, but a fantastic gathering tool. And then right there in the Roots Tech app, you can reach out to your match and say, hey, let's meet up at the Your DNA Guide booth, right? And it could be fun. So gathering, very important. So we're going to talk about including in a minute, but first we're going to move on to our next steps. So who should test? Inviting your relatives to test. And keep on learning. These are your 3 next steps. So first of all, who should test? The simple rule is anyone who does not have both parents available to test should be tested themselves. Okay, now if you're like me and you've had both of your parents tested, you are genetically irrelevant. I know, it seems kind of sad, but for family history purposes, I'm genetically irrelevant. I only have half of their DNA after all. So if I'm going to do any research, I'm going to do it with their DNA. Now, testing myself has other purposes, and of course I've done that. But for family history, you always need the older generation. Okay? So anyone who does not have both parents needs to be tested. You will also need to probably invite your relatives to test. To invite someone to test, I find they need 2 things. They need information, and they need inspiration. So the information they need is they need to know the logistics. How does it work? How do you test? Who do I have to give my stuff to? And do I have to take, people still ask me, do I need to give blood? Okay, so that's a no. So there's a lot of logistics that people need to know and understand before they're willing to even think about testing. But far more important than the information is inspiration. You've got to help them understand why. Why do we do this? Why are we testing? Why is preserving their record so important? So remember that they are the only one of them, right? They're it. They're a record that no one else will ever be. And you have to help them see that and see their value and importance in documenting your family. So information and inspiration. Of course, keep on learning. So you're here, which means you're totally interested in learning, which is fantastic. So again, I'll put up the dates and times of the next steps in this series at the end. But you're in the right place. And honestly, especially with DNA, the more you listen to it, the easier it gets to understand. It is a different language. But the more you hear it, the more you start to understand it. In fact, last night, we did a murder mystery dinner with me and Nathan Dillon Goodwin, who's a fantastic author. He has a booth also. And a lady who came to our event last year commented this year, she said, last year, I was totally lost. I didn't really understand any of the DNA stuff. And she goes, but this year, I kept up. And to me, there is no bigger win than that. So hang on for that moment. Okay, if you still feel like you're a little bit underwater, just keep swimming, right? Isn't that, just keep swimming, right? Okay, just keep swimming. All right. Now, including your family. This is, I think, what's maybe at the deepest desire of all of our hearts, is that our family will want to be included in the work that we're doing. So, 2 stories. On Tuesday, I brought all my stuff up to put here in the exhibit hall, and I asked my son, who's 18 and a senior, and do seniors ever go to school? I'm like, don't you have school? He's like, meh. I was like, well, great. If you're not going to school, you can help me. So he hauled boxes and boxes of books and workbooks and all the things for the booth. And he's watching, as everybody in the exhibit hall is setting up, and he asks me, he's like, do you think people will still be doing this in like 10 years? Thanks for validating my work, son. And I said, yes, of course we will, right? And he was like, why? And I was like, because family will never stop being important. We will never stop wondering who we are and where we came from, ever. We will always be here doing this. And he's like, meh, makes sense. Okay, second story. When I was, do you ever get those solicitations to like go stay for free at this really swanky resort as long as you'll go listen to their 3-hour pitch on buying their thing? Yeah. So we lived in South Florida for 8 years, and so we were getting these pitches all the time because there's tons of resorts in South Florida. Finally, we're like, fine, we'll go. And it was fun, right? Really, you get 3 days for free. If you have to sit there for 3 hours, it was totally worth it. But, we walk in there, and the man starts talking to us about resorts, and he starts saying how luxurious they are and blah, blah, blah. And we're like, we don't really do luxury. Like, it's fine with us. We're just more interested in family, right? We're about connecting and, like, having places that we can take our kids and stuff. Yeah, he was the worst salesman. He kept pushing the luxury. I was like, you're not listening to us. We don't care about luxury. Pitch us on the family, right? As soon as he heard us say, he should have pivoted his sales pitch and been like, yes, this is a great place you can bring your family, and it's always available, and there's always things to do, and you'll be away from the world. There's a million ways he could have sold us on family. He didn't even try. And I think for us, sometimes when we're talking about family history to our family, we do that. We miss the mark. We miss what's going to include them because we're so focused on what matters to us, right? So in order to include our family in family history, I think what we need to do is really tune into what they want. What are they hoping to get? What do they need from family history? We know what we love about it. It could be the search. It could be the census records. It could be any number of things, but what do they want? If you were to sit down with your kids or your grandkids right now, what would motivate them? That's your pitch. Okay? So it's really important that this work keeps going. And you just all nodded and agreed with me when you said, of course we'll be here in 10 years. But guess what? We won't if the next generation doesn't keep going. So you've got to figure out how to include them. So I've made this little silly story, and you can get this from the handout, but we're going to fill it out together, and then you can take this home and do this with your family. I think this is a fun way to include people. So I'm going to need your guys' help. I need a color. I heard blue first, but there's another color. I'm going to put purple. I need an adjective. Happy. Okay. A body part. Come on, family show. Toenail. Okay. Another body part. Nose. Personality trait. What? Outgoing. I thought you said echoing, and I was like, it's not something I've heard before. Okay. A word that begins with D. I thought I heard dare. N. A word that begins with N. Nice. A word that begins with A. Auspicious? Holy moly. Another word beginning with D. Devoted. A word beginning with N. Naughty. Okay. Word beginning with A. Amazing. Okay. A place. Of course. Massachusetts. Another place. Ireland. promise this is worth it in the end. Okay, another place. Where? I don't know where that is. Ticonderoga. I'm going to put in parentheses for myself. New York. Okay, a hobby. Oh, come on, guys, get creative. Another hobby. Beadboard. Okay, an occupation. Fireman. Another occupation. Preacher? Love it. Number. 33. Another number. 10. Least favorite food. Anchovies. Favorite food. Pizza. A number? 8. All right, I need your name of an ancestor you know, like for sure. H-U-E-R, Johann Huer. And what's your relationship to someone beneath you, like daughter, child, granddaughter, daughter? Okay. Adjective. Happy. Okay, are you guys ready to read our story? Okay, thanks for helping. Here's so you can follow along. Of course, I haven't filled out the blanks, but it'll help you. There's no question. You are the only one of you. You with your blue eyes and your purple hair and happy jokes. But do you know why you are you? You are you because of them, your ancestors. They passed down their toenails and their noses and maybe even their outgoing personalities all through their DNA. No, DNA does not stand for dare nice auspiciously or devoted naughty amazing, but deoxyribonucleic acid. Yes, a big word that ties us all together. To find out what's in your DNA, you can spit in a tube and mail it to a DNA testing company. It was there that my DNA confirmed that we're from Massachusetts and Ireland. My DNA also surprised me by telling me, it did surprise me, that I was from Ticonderoga, New York. Can't read my own handwriting. But did you know that? But our DNA connects us to more than just places. It connects us to faces, real people who liked genealogy and beadboard and worked as a fireman and a preacher, people who had 33 babies and 10 cows and had to eat anchovies instead of pizza every night. To put names on these faces, we have the help of our 8 DNA cousins. Who knew we were so popular? All of these cousins have pieces of DNA that we have, pieces that connect us to our common ancestors. In fact, my DNA tells us that we're actually John Huer's daughter. Isn't that happy? What's even more amazing is how many ancestors are hiding in our DNA. We just have to find them. So, can we have a round of applause for all of us? Wasn't that fun? So, I hope you see that there are so many ways that your DNA can connect you, whether it's verifying or adding or gathering or including. And I just want you to take a minute and think about what is your role in this work. Why are you doing this? Are you doing it to verify or to add or to gather? You don't have to do all of those things, by the way. You can choose one. You can be the great family gatherer. It can be your job to celebrate your ancestors, to remember them, to tell their stories. That can be your job. You don't actually have to learn how to use DNA, how to group it, how to sort it, so that you can add an ancestor. That doesn't have to be your job. But it's important that we go into these jobs with purpose, right? And that we understand what DNA can do and what it can't do. and that we're open to what we might find, which you just never know, right? Now, RootsTech usually has a feedback button in the app that you can push and say if you liked or didn't like this session. And in this section of my presentation, I usually put up that picture. I did not see a clipboard in the app like they usually have, but it's really important that whatever way you find to give RootsTech feedback about presentations that you do it really helps them and it helps us as speakers as well. So please provide feedback in some way eventually. As I said, this was number one, and I did this on purpose. I want to have lots of time for questions, because in a kind of number one class, I want to make sure you guys are all on solid footing. So if you want to, you can queue up. There are microphones on either end, so if you have questions for me, we're almost to the end, so you can get up and we can answer people's questions here. So tomorrow morning, we'll do that ethnicity, talk all about those results. And then in the afternoon, we'll talk about that match list. So tomorrow we're doing places first, and then people. And then on Saturday morning, we're going to go through a case study. And it's so fun, and it's so helpful, I think, to just go beginning to end in a case study to watch all the movement, all the clicks, how you do things. So that's going to be Saturday morning. And then, because I still feel like I had more to tell you, I added another lecture, which is just going to be a free webinar for anybody who wants to come. It'll be post-RootsTech, so it will be next week, March 7th. That's Thursday at 7. Sorry, the 7th at 2. So it will be, I'm going to do a harder case study. So we're going to do a good, solid case study on Saturday. But, things don't always work out nicely, and sometimes you have more complicated things in your family tree, and I just didn't have time to talk about it this week, so I wanted to make sure, especially for those of you who may have more complicated situations, that we covered that as well. So part 5 is next week. And if you want to register for that, this is the QR code. We have it at our booth as well. And I think there's a link in your handout to register as well for that part 5. And again, if you have more questions that you think of after this, I have booth workers at our booth, which is 301, which again is just through the door of the exhibit hall and directly to the left. So we have a good solid 15 minutes for questions, and that was, again, purposeful. But if you guys don't ask questions, then we're just going to sit and look at each other, which is fine. If you have a question, you can ask it, and then I'll just repeat it if you don't want to go to the microphone. Yes, sir.
If we took our test years ago, do we want to retest?
Okay, great question. Stephen's asking, if you took a test years ago, do you want to retest? And the general answer is no. You don't need to retest. So far at least, every update that's been given by our DNA testing companies has been free, except for at 23andMe, where they had a little switch and you had to pay extra. But mostly, no, you do not need to retest. Spend your testing dollar testing your brother, your cousin, your second cousin, and all of those people, definitely. Okay, question.
Yes. Do you have a recommendation on a testing company as we're trying to get our relatives to do their testing? As a side question as well, what is your opinion on which of them have the largest databases for matching?
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So choosing a DNA testing company. So when you're choosing a DNA testing company, you want to consider 2 main factors. And he mentioned one, which is database size. As I said, you can only have as much success as the people who've already tested. That's the truth. So to get the largest database gives you the largest chance of finding as many people as you can, right? So that's the first factor, is database size. The second is, are they going to help you do genealogy? Because it actually doesn't do you that much good to have a DNA match if there's no way to figure out your relationship to that DNA match. Okay, so database size and genealogy. So we've got 5 major DNA testing companies. Of the 5, the largest database by far is at Ancestry. So they have about 25 million people tested. Their next competitor is 23andMe at about 13 million. Okay, so they've got almost twice as many samples as other people. However, Ancestry's database is largely North American. So if your ancestors immediately jump the pond then the chances of you finding an international match are lower. And this is all just my opinion, by the way. There's no solid numbers on this. They don't actually give us these numbers. This is my experience. So the chances of finding an international match are sometimes higher at MyHeritage, who has an overall smaller database, but in general, for most people, it seems to be a little more diverse because they're a more diverse company as far as the markets they've been in. Ancestry just barely started selling DNA tests outside of a very small market this last year. So it wasn't even possible to get a DNA test from Ancestry in many countries. Now it is. And so I anticipate over the next couple of years, their database will balloon and expand to include a lot more international matches. So database size is one. Two is genealogy tools. Right now I showed you two tools, the Throughlines tool and the theory of family relativity. They don't just help you gather, they help you with your DNA matches. And we'll talk about that in lecture 3. Those are really powerful tools. MyHeritage and Ancestry give us really, really powerful tools to help us actually do something with our DNA matches. So in my opinion, those two companies are kind of at the top. But Family Tree DNA is the only one offering Y and mitochondrial DNA testing, which is extremely valuable in our family history. So, as an overall testing plan, the plan is test first at Ancestry, spit in their tube. That's the only way you can get into their database. Once they process your results, you get a file containing all of your information. We call that your raw data. You take that raw data, download it to your computer, you uploaded it to MyHeritage, you upload it to Family Tree DNA, you can even upload it to a company called Living DNA for free. That's a deal, right? Yeah, free. Okay, so then you're in Ancestry, MyHeritage, Family Tree DNA, and Living DNA for whatever price you paid for Ancestry. Yeah, not a bad deal, right? Now, there are some features at MyHeritage that I think are worth paying for. So you'd pay a $29 unlock fee at MyHeritage, which is free this week. Thank you for reminding me of that, which is free this week. Okay? And then you're in full Ancestry, full MyHeritage for the price of Ancestry plus $29 unless you do it this week. And then it's just the price of Ancestry. So that's the plan. Ready? Tested Ancestry. Spit in the tube. They process your results. You get a raw data file. And I have all the instructions how to do this on my website, by the way. If you search our blog for transferring, that's what this is called, transferring. So you download your data to your computer. You upload it to MyHeritage for free. You upload it to Family Tree DNA for free. You upload it to Living DNA for free. Then you pay your $29 unlock fee at MyHeritage, and you are off and running, ready to be successful. Question?
Yeah, that was part of, you answered some of my questions. Is there ever going to be a time they allow us to, like, this is crazy. So you have to test at all these different companies. And
She wants world peace.
I do.
Everyone?
I do.
It's fine.
I signed my pledge.
So no, there won't be, and we don't want it, honestly, because competition is good, right? We want these companies to try to one-up each other with their tools. We want them to try to one-up each other with their service because that's better for us, right? So it's a little inconvenient, yes, but I think overall still
You
works
just
well.
have to test with each one and see who you come up with.
Test or transfer, right.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And then, like a 7%, is that usually it? Because on some of these sites, it'll give you who they think it is. Like a 7% is like a second cousin. Is that pretty much, do you have that in your books?
Right, yes, that's in the book, but essentially there are two ways the testing company talks about your relationship. They either give you a percentage of how much DNA you share, or they give you the number in centimorgans, so that CM number. In general, the CM number is more talked about in our circles rather than the percentage. But yes, in general, a CM number translates to a certain group of relationships. So if you're sharing, say, 1,700 centimorgans with someone, there's only a handful of relationships you can have with that person given that amount of shared DNA. But the lower the amount of shared DNA, the more possible relationships. So it can get tricky, but we'll talk about that in lecture 3. question.
So I know why DNA can be used to find parents and grandparents. Can you use it to break through if you have a fifth generation? Like I had my great uncle tested, and 4 generations back, I have John Stewart in 1793 in New Jersey. Can you use it to get past that?
So Y-DNA is actually the best at getting past that. Okay, so remember, autosomal DNA can only help you with a 3 times great or closer. Anyone beyond that, you'll want to turn to Y-DNA testing or mitochondrial DNA, though Y is better and more powerful. So Y-DNA has a lot of power to help us gather and add ancestors in that kind of 8, 9 generation range even. So yes, you'll definitely want to. There's a Stewart project you can join. There you are. There's a Stewart project you can join, and there's a lot of power and value in learning how to use those results to understand relationships. Super awesome stuff. Question over here.
I wanted to ask, I noticed that you didn't include family tree DNA as a free upload.
I did, yeah, FTDNA, so you free
yes.
upload to FTDNA, and then you'll want to physically test with them for Y and mitochondrial.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Yes. So she says, I'm telling you, you need to test the older generation. If you don't have an older generation, if you're you've reached the top of the food chain, congratulations. Or if you just have one parent, then you test that person, but then you look around for anyone else on that older generation. Do you have any aunts or uncles on that older generation? Do your parents have any cousins on that older generation? Is there anyone up above you? If there is, you test them. If not, you test you, and you test your siblings, you test your cousins. Anybody on your generation then becomes the target.
Hi. Yeah, I just wanted to ask about the workshop that you mentioned at the beginning, and is that something that you do regularly, or are there any future ones?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So Your DNA Guide, the Academy, is what we call our learning center. And so we have a Y-DNA course for anybody interested in learning about Y-DNA. We have a course on endogamy, for those of you who may have endogamy in your family tree. What Kristen took was called the DNA Skills Workshop. It's like our kind of big flagship workshop. We offer it twice a year. We'll be starting again in March. And it really takes you through this process, intensely and step by step. I think what makes the difference is what we call our spin process, where right now all you're doing is studying with me. You're learning. You're sitting here watching me. We're not interacting that much. Maybe your mind wandered a little bit in the middle, which is fine. That happens, right? It's hard. It's hard to sit here in a room and learn together, really intensely learn. And so what the workshop does is that you watch a 7-minute video, and then you'll have worksheet to do, practice. And then I'll give you a case study to do for homework. And you work through the case study, and then you check your answer, and you get it right. And you're like, oh my gosh, I did it. I understood that. Because a big problem all of you will have is you're going to go home after this week, and you're going to apply the things that you've learned, but then you'll get stuck, right? You'll be like, is that what she said? Or did I do that right? Right? So it's really about building confidence, and that's what the workshop does really well, is through these practice sessions, you build confidence, and then you have a coach that you work with, and so that coach can help you implement your work into your own research. So that's DNA Skills. If you want to learn more about it, again, our booth is 301. Let's take a question over here.
My husband has a third great grandmother who was left as a foundling on the cathedral steps. And so I think you've already answered this, but my question is, he's done his DNA, but it would actually be his female cousins on his father's side that would be able to help more than actually him doing the DNA. Is that correct?
So it depends on how you want to approach it. So his 3 times great was the foundling?
Yes.
Yeah, so the problem is you're looking for his 4 times greats, right? And that's just outside the edge of autosomal DNA testing. So it's a little hard to get there from here. I do think in the future we will be able to move further back. Speaking of the future, if you're not busy at 12:30, right here on this stage we're celebrating 25 years of genetic genealogy, and we're going to be talking about kind of the history of the last 25 years and also where we're headed. That was an aside. But yes, mitochondrial DNA would be a good option. And so you would want to find a direct maternal descendant of her to be tested at family tree DNA.
Okay. Yeah, his aunt is passed away, but she did have 2 daughters. So
Perfect.
okay. Thank you.
Okay. Question on this side, and then we won't. Okay, good.
Are there companies getting closer with testing envelopes and stamps, and do you recommend any of those right now?
So there are 2 companies that are doing that work with mixed results. And so it's kind of up to you. It's like you have a testing dollar, right? And you can spend it in a bunch of different ways. To test an envelope, for example, is a lot of testing dollars. So it's kind of like how many regular people in your family could you get tested for that same number? And overall, would that be a better net gain than trying to go after this little thing? The problem with, other than the technical problems, is that once you get that profile, let's say they're successful and they're able to get a profile off that envelope, there's a couple problems. Number one, is the DNA actually of your ancestor? Who knows? Number 2, what are you going to do with that file? Like, you can put it into MyHeritage, which is great. You can put it into Family Tree DNA, which is great. But you can't get it into Ancestry. And so, again, following the testing plan that I gave you, I mean, right now, I didn't even look. Does anybody know how much our kits? I know MyHeritage is $39. What's Ancestry? $39 out there. So, guys, $39, you can get into 4 databases. So that's a lot of tests you could purchase for your family at this price, right? So I think overall, it's still just better science and math to test lots more family members than it is to go after that envelope.
So my dad's family is the problem. So it's the Y DNA that I'm looking for. I have one surviving brother who thinks if he does his DNA, the government's going to come. I'm assuming his children or my late brother's children would also be.
Yes. So with the Y DNA, as long as we're talking direct male lines with no interruptions, the person who takes the test should have the same surname as the person you're researching. That's kind of your litmus test. So yes, any of your nephews would work. But to your brother's point, Y DNA is actually the safest kind of DNA because it literally cannot identify him uniquely at all. Lots of men will have his same Y DNA, right? You can use any name you want. People have submitted using Mickey Mouse. Right? So there's a lot of ways you can reassure him and protect him. Again, he needs some more information, but he needs inspiration, right? So if you can find a way to inspire him, or send him to me.
You haven't met my brother.
I'll inspire him. Bring him over. I'll inspire him.
And should I do autosomal if I can talk one of his children into, I do both then?
You should. Yeah,
Okay.
Again, anyone who does not have both parents tested should test.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is the academy you were talking about earlier online or in person?
It's online. It's online. So the academies are all administered through like a little learning center that we have. And all the videos that you have are yours forever for the life of your DNA guide. So you go through the class live. They're in cohorts, so there's a start date and an end date to help you like get through the class. But afterwards, you can always go back and rewatch and things like that as well. So, yes, question.
I have a half-brother who 80 years ago was an American airman in Europe, was shot down and vanished, missing. We have now, after years of research, identified a specific grave. There are thousands of Americans buried in American cemeteries, like the Ardennes is where the grave that we have identified as a potential. That would be 80 years. The body would have been in water in the North Sea, the Wadden Sea, for months. There may be 20 pounds, 30 pounds of remains. What say you about how accurate, even if I could fight the big fight with the government and get that done?
If you could fight the big fight with the government, it's so hard to tell the state of remains, and that is definitely a factor. But given the time period and all the things, it's very possible, and techniques are really good these days. If you had a really good lab, it's very possible that you could make that identification if you could fight the big fight. DNA could help you. Okay. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining me today. And if you have more questions, I'll be here or I'll be at my booth, and I hope to see you at the next sessions.